Magandang umaga, Malacañang Press Corps, and welcome sa ating press briefing ngayong araw, May 30th. During the sectoral meeting with President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr., the fiscal incentives for export and domestic market-oriented enterprises were discussed, following calls to review the current tax framework and to find ways to level the playing field between local and foreign businesses. To give us more details on this, we are joined by Finance Secretary Benjamin Diokno. Good morning, Secretary Diokno.
Good morning. So let me start by talking about the current tax system. The tax system that we inherited from President Duterte is much better than what he inherited from President Aquino. Okay, so that is really because he passed tax measures that actually are real reforms. Okay, so if you look at, say, I think slide number 3, do you have a copy? So the tax reform packages were designed to provide income tax relief to the majority of the tax-paying community while generating revenues by increasing the tax on lifestyle products and services consumed by the top 1% of wealthiest individuals. So the first line there, if you notice, there is it's a real tax reform because we cut, number one, we cut personal income tax, okay? Cut by 458.1 billion. So that translates into, if you look at your paycheck, that is almost equivalent to 1 month's salary, no? And then we also cut, meron ding negative 148.4 billion there. We cut corporate income tax. Okay, that is to make our corporate income tax competitive with our ASEAN neighbors, and also we also gave schools and hospitals a break. So so there's a cut there, but at the same time we have to collect more revenue. So we imposed excise and VAT on lifestyle products and services. So dyan na pumasok yung tax on sweetened beverages, di ba? Tobacco, cosmetic procedures, and automobiles, among others. So we were able to collect 1.1 trillion out of those new taxes. And then, of course, we also increased documentary stamp tax, provided tax amnesty on estate taxes, which we recently extended to 2025. Fuel marking, also we imposed that, and financial tax, among others. So that resulted in a 212.2 billion tax intake. And so, therefore, the tax system, as a result, we were able to collect an additional 709.9 billion. So that is the kind of tax system that we inherited from the previous administration. Now, in this morning, we were looking at what are the types of incentives that we continue to provide to industries who would like to locate in the Philippines. Now, prior to create, at least 1,000 projects have enjoyed incentives for at least 20 years. This is table 4. No? Still, a 10-year transition period was provided to all existing projects. So this is to make sure, if you look at the count of projects, incentive availment 0 to 9, 6,152, 10 to 19 years. At tapos meron diyang forever yung kanyang tax incentives. Hindi pwede yun, di ba? Tax incentives forever. So we rationalize it, no? But we provided a transition period for many of this. So prior to create, tax incentives were granted without systematic assessment of fiscal cost and benefits. So there were a lot of EPSAs and other investment giving agencies that if you ask the government how much taxes are forgone as a result of this, nobody can give you an answer, no? Because there are so many. and nobody's keeping track of the incentives. So, so that's the first thing that was addressed by the CREATE law. No? So, but at the same time, we provide a 10-year transition period for those who are already enjoying some form of incentives. So yung mga forever, kinat na namin na 10. You can continue to enjoy incentives, pero maximum of 10. And then we also, the CREATE law also mandated the conduct of cost-benefit analysis prior to the approval of tax incentives. And this is to ensure that the fiscal and economic costs and benefits are carefully considered before granting incentives. So now, CREATE was designed to modernize our fiscal incentives regime by enacting a performance-based, this is slide number 5, performance-based, could you show slide number 5? Yes, performance-based, targeted, time-bound, and transparent. Okay, so because as I said, prior to this CREATE law, we have no way of estimating magkano talaga yung nawawala sa atin. But from 2015 to 2020, we have granted approximately 2.4 trillion in tax incentives, or an average of 407 billion per year, without a cost-benefit analysis to guide the incentives. So let's go to the next slide. So we would like to highlight that CREATE is based on internationally recognized standards in the design of tax frameworks for incentives, and the list of key recommendations presented are provided by the OECD. This is Organization of Economic Cooperation countries. These are something like 38 countries, which are democratic and market-oriented, and it is based in Paris. And these are the some of the advantages of the CREATE modernized, which will modernize our tax code and follows the OECD guidelines. Now, why is the global policy trajectory shifting from consumption-based to income-based? So in taxation, you have a choice of taxing income or taxing consumption. Okay? And so you ask yourself, which is better? You tax income more or you tax consumption more? Anong sagot? This is para class. Personally, I prefer to tax consumption, because consumption is what you take away from society. Okay? Kasi if, for example, you're independently wealthy, you got your money from your grandpa or your dad. You don't work, wala kang income, so wala kang binabayaran na income tax. But you spend all days sa mall o kaya sa 5-star hotel consuming. Dapat tinatax ka, di ba? So that's what you take away from society. Samantalang yung income, that is your contribution to society. Di ba? Kaya ka binabayaran ka. That's your value to society. Yung pay mo is your value to society, your contribution. So it's to me, it's fairer that we tax consumption rather than income. Di ba kayo dapat matuwa nun? Kaya nga binaba namin yung personal income tax eh. In fact, this year, nagkaroon na naman kayo ng additional benefit, additional cut in personal income tax. No? Yun ang basic, yun ang ngayon ang trajectory ng mga reforms. No? So these are the arguments. Consumption taxes, but sasabihin niya, pero bakit kung consumption tax, like a value-added tax, is a tax on consumption, di ba? So hindi ba unfair yun sa mga may hirap? Unfair yan, di ba? But our VAT system is pro-poor in the following sense. Food in its original state is VAT-free. So pag bumuli ka sa palengke, walang VAT doon eh. Okay? Even sa grocery, if you buy rice or meat in the grocery, walang VAT yun. Okay? So in the Philippines, our VAT system is food in its original state is VAT-free. In other countries, merong discrimination. For example, the VAT in general is 7%, pagka food, 4%. In our case, 0 talaga. In fact, maski yung lechon manok is VAT-free. Do you notice that? VAT-free yun. Lechon manok is VAT-free. Yeah? You can check that, okay? Naging ano yan eh, nung nire-revise yung VAT, naglabi yung gumagawa ng lechon manok. So, naging freeze din siya, no? So, our VAT system is actually pro-poor. So, in this study of the OECD, consumption taxes are less vulnerable to the effects of globalization. In a study by OECD, it highlighted the need to shift the tax mix away from income taxes toward taxes that have less negative impact on economic growth, including taxes on consumption. So that's the second argument, is that consumption taxes, could you show that slide again? Consumption taxes are more progressive. This indicates that as income increases, households tend to spend a smaller proportion of their income on goods and services from the informal sector. Consumption taxes are also more neutral than income taxes, since consumption taxes are based on spending rather than income or wealth. Lastly, based on OECD consumption tax trends in 2022, there is a consistent increase in the number of countries adopting the VAT. Okay. The share of general consumption taxes, especially VAT in total revenue in OECD countries, almost doubled. Okay. So yung VAT as a percent of total tax collection increased from 12% in 1965 to 21% in 2021. Now, in the Philippines, prior to the passage of the reforms, our tax code contains many exemptions. There are 56 lines of exemptions and 84 additional exemptions in special laws. So from 2016 to 2020, the Philippines collected an average 723 billion from VAT, which is 40% of the expected VAT collection. So while the Philippines has the highest VAT rate compared to the other countries in this part of the world, yung ating VAT collection is the most inefficient, only 40%. No? So yung if perfect, it should be 100%. Tayo, kinokolekta lang natin is 40%. And that's because of a lot of exemptions. So the various incentives and exemptions granted outside the Philippine tax code erodes the revenue base and requires the establishment of safeguards in tax administration to prevent abuse, which further inflates the true cost of granting incentives. So based on a study by the World Bank, the policy gap, meaning what is supposed to be collected and what is actually collected, that's the gap, could reach as high as 539 billion. And as I said earlier, even with the next slide, please, slide number 11, even with the highest VAT rate compared with other countries, ours is 12% VAT rate, our VAT efficiency is only 40%. So then we made the distinction between export and domestic market enterprises. And the most recent reform favors giving incentives to export-oriented firms. And the reason being that if you're an export-oriented firm, you are competing with the rest of the world. And therefore, you should not be put at a disadvantage. Whereas if you're locally based, then you are competing with other local domestic industries, and therefore you should not be given a lot of incentives. So to sum up, the distinction between registered exporters and next slide, please. Next slide. Yes. the difference between registered exporters and domestic market-oriented enterprises must remain to preserve the integrity of our tax framework. So, ito yung mga arguments why we need to help those who are export-oriented and why we need to tax the domestic firms. So the revenue impact is significant with an annual average of 34 billion or 409 billion in one incentive cycle. These are the incentives that we're giving away. So because we really want to maintain fiscal discipline and we want to consolidate until 2028, there's reason to believe that we need to preserve the existing tax system. It's not perfect, but we continue to review it. If there are some areas we can improve on it, we will improve on it. So that's the end of my statement. Any questions?
Okay. Any questions from the press corps? I think they're thinking of the lechon manok. Okay. Ivan Mayrina, GMA7.
Secretary, what do we intend to do with the low VAT efficiency?
Yeah, we actually talked with the International Monetary Fund, and we asked them to conduct a study on where we can improve on broadening the tax base, meaning maybe find areas where we can recover yung mga too much exemptions. No? For example, one exemption talaga is the cooperatives. Yun, madami talagang hindi nagbabayad ng VAT because of the cooperatives. No? So the IMF study will tell us how do we recover. So kasi 0.4, that's really poor, di ba? Poor performance. But you know, the value-added tax is the best tax in the world. It's, I think, being imposed in 90% of the countries in the world. Okay, so it is in our interest to improve on the efficiency of the VAT. Okay.
Okay. Eden Santos, Net 25.
Opo. Secretary, medyo na-nosebleed daw po yung iba natin kasama.
Sorry, but...
in layman's term lang po, paki-explain na lang po mabuti. Ano po? Yung ating existing po na tax system ngayon, you're planning to change it sana. Ano po ba yung nakikita ninyo from the DOF na maganda pong sistema ng pagbibigay ng tax incentives, although sabi nyo may mga ilang kumpanya na po na merong forever na ini-enjoy na tax incentives pero kinat nyo na into 10. Ano po yung magandang design po o ng tax system na pwede sa Pilipinas na both are fair for the middle class and upper class, tsaka yung pinaka-lower class. And then, sino-sino po or ilan po yung mga kumpanyang sinasabi ninyo na nag-enjoy ng mahabang panahon ng kanilang forever na tax incentives? At paano po ito makatutulong sa revenue generation ng ating gobyerno?
Okay. Okay, let me admit that I'm the father of VAT in this country. Okay? Ako nag-umpisa ng VAT. Kailan po? 1986 pa yung VAT, no? We adopted VAT in 1986. CORI yun, CORI. But we implemented it in 1988 because we need time to really study it from other countries. And so constantly we try to improve on it, no? Yung VAT. It replaced close to 100 different taxes, no? Napaka-complicated, hard to track. And so, I think it simplified the whole tax system. Ngayon, ito namang incentives, because, di ba, I'm sure naririnig niyo yung mga EPSAs dyan, di ba? Export Processing Zone. That's usually used by countries to attract foreign investors. Kasi pag nag-locate ka sa EPSA, then you cut the bureaucracy. So, madali ang makakuha ng permit, ganun, the power is there, ganun. And then, madali mong ma-monitor yung mga importation ng mga inputs for the firms. Na. Ang kaso sa atin, naabuso yung concept na EPSA. Kasi alam nyo, may mga building sa Makati, EPSA di ba? Export Processing Zone sila di ba? Category. So there are close to 100 export processing zones all over. So we have to put order, no? Kasi nga naabuso eh. And I said earlier, na it's really difficult to track how much taxes we are foregoing. So yun. So we changed it so that now, if you want to avail of incentives, you go through a body called now Fiscal Incentives Review Board, no? Which is an office under the Ministry of Finance, called Department of Finance, which I chair, and co-chair ko dyan si DTI Secretary Pascual. No? So, Finance, co-chair DTI, mga members niyan, DBM, NEDA, at saka Office of the President. So yan, if you want to apply for incentives, doon ka pupunta. If it's more than 2 billion worth of investment, 2 billion, may cut-off. So yung mga maliliit na investment, pupunta ka na lang sa EPSA. They will take care of that, or the Board of Investments. So yun ang bagong system ngayon. We have a better handle of the amount of money that we are giving away in terms of incentives. And usually, fixed din yung term. Kaya nga, nakalagay dun sa, it's transparent. Ito you're entitled to income tax holiday, you're entitled to free importation of machineries, etc. Yung mga ganun.
Okay. Joe Manahan.
Hello.
Sorry.
Opo. Yung pong, so close to 100 po yung mga company na nag-enjoy ng
No.
before.
More than 100. Thousands of firms are. They are located right now in many EPSAs, and there are new investments coming in. Yun, binire-review namin yan. No? So for example, if you are bringing in new technology, mas mahaba yung incentives na binibigay namin. Di ba? Pagka yung mga tawag na, well, some new companies, yun, binibigyan din namin ng incentives. Say 7 years of income tax holidays, mga free importation of machinery. But yung really innovative investments, mas mahabang incentives na.
So we're expecting po kapag tuloy na isagawa na po natin yan, tataas yung mga presyo ng mga produkto nila. Example niyo po yung lechon manok, sabi niyo walang tax, walang VAT yun.
Walang VAT.
Actually, may VAT po yung pag nalipat na sa ang tawag doon yung hindi lang po masyadong alam dahil pinapatungan na rin ng presyo ng mga negosyante.
Hindi VAT yun. Patong na lang nila yun. So, baka kinukolektahan nila kayo ng VAT pero hindi nila binabayad yung VAT. Sasabihin nila may VAT pero walang VAT ang lechon manok. Okay?
Okay, Joe Banahan, ABS-CBN.
Hello, sir. Hello po. Good morning po, sir. Sir, kanina po ba na-discuss ito sa cabinet meeting with the President and ano pong reaction niya?
Yeah, na-discuss namin to kay Presidente and sabi niya, continue to look into it. Kasi alam mo, binabalansin namin eh. Meron kasi tayong tinatawag na fiscal program na hanggang 2028. And right now, marami ring demands on the spending side. No? So, kung mamimigay ka ng mga incentives, mawawala ka ng collection. So, we are studying it. It's not a perfect system, so we'll look for improvements. But right now, our revenue system is doing well. Okay? So, sabi ko nga, yung namanan namin kay Presidente Duterte na tax system is much, much better than the tax system that he inherited from the previous administration. Okay.
Sir, usapang tax pa rin. May nakita po yung BIR na parang tax deficiency sa PSE, around 189 million po. And gusto po ito i-challenge ng PSE. Any reaction po sa side ng DOF?
Well, ginagawa lang naman ng BIR yung trabaho niya. That's really their job. And the customs ganun din. No? So we are putting pressure on both collecting agency. Meron kaming program, revenues nila for this year, next year, and hanggang 2020, 2028. So they're just doing their job. Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? I think we're good. You have the slides to mull it over.
Nosebleed ba?
Thank you very much, Malacañang Press Corps, and thank you, Secretary Diokno.
Katatagan ng ekonomiya, yan po ang napag-usapan with Secretary Diokno sa isang press briefing sa Malacañang. Detalye dyan, abangan mamaya po sa Centro Balita. Nagbabalik ang public briefing, #laging handa PH at kasama pa rin natin si DFA Undersecretary Eduardo De Vega para sa kalaman po ng ating mga kababayan. Yusek, are you there? Good morning again. Pasensya na po.
Good morning again. Thank you.
Pasensya na po. Ano ba ang gusto o demands ng Kuwaiti government sa ating pamahalaan, Yusek, upang matatapos na ang issue ng employment sa ating mga OFWs?
Well, main goal, main demands nila or main expectations. Number one, kailangan may formal admission tayo na nilapag natin yung batas nila, yung soberanya ng Kuwait with some of our actions. Halimbawa, yung bumidiretso tayong kausapin yung employer o yung abogado natin kumakausap sa employer o kumakausap sa recruitment agency para gumalaw. Imbis na lahat dadaan sa kanilang authorities, sa police authorities. Ano ba yung pag nag-shelter tayo ng mga runaway Filipino, sabi lang, iba, hindi naman runaway, mga tumatakas lang dahil may pending case or gano'n, no? Or flimsy, yung mababaw yung dahilan na overwork daw. Babaw daw yun na dahilan para mag-runaway. Kaya gusto nila umamin tayo. Pangalawa, gusto nila, mangako tayo na bukod sa magpamanhin, mangako tayo na hindi na natin gagawin yun. Well, talaga naman, hindi naman natin intention lumabag sa batas ng Kuwait, pero kailangan natin protektahan natin kababayan. At kauling demand nila, sabi ng kanilang mga kinaukulan, na kailangan natin, yung dapat natin, o mga ako tayo na yung mga gumawang kasalanan embassy ay mananagot, kakasuhan natin ng administrative charge or what. Pero ngayon, sinabi ng presidente na hindi tayo magpapatawad dahil ginagawa din natin ng hindi tayo hihingi ng tawad dahil bakit tayo humingi pa tayo ng tawad dahil sa mga naabusong mga maids or mga namamatay na kababayan natin, pinoprotektan lang natin yung ating mga kababayan, no? At saka yung lalong-lalo na hindi natin kakasuhan yung ating mga kawani ng pamahalaan, whether sa DFA or OWA or DOLE o ngayon DMW na nandun simply because masyadong ganado sila mag-protect sa ating nationals. Kaya nga bigyan nga dapat natin ng parangal dahil ginagawa nila yun, no? So kailangan pag-usapan pa until maintindihan nila yung issues.
Opo. May tanong po ang GMA News Desk, Yusek. Will the Philippines admit na may mali, na may violation ng Pilipinas?
Ang position natin is wala tayong violations at kung meron man, kailangan pakinggan nila yung ating paliwanag na meron ding international law obligation or function yung mga embassies na protektahan yung kanilang mga nationals, no? Of course, we don't want to violate the law of Kuwait. Now, tayo ba'y nagkaroon ng violation na? Yes, humingi na tayo ng tawad sa Kuwait noong 2018 dahil ang ginawa ng ating dating pamahalaan, di ba, naalala niyo yun, nung hindi lang tumatanggap ng runaway, inuudyok pa yung mga Pilipino na tumakas sa kanilang mga amo at sinasagip sila, film pa nila, naalala niyo, tinitape pa nila yung mga operations. Ayun, okay, inamin naman natin noon na violation yun at saka hindi tayong tawad. Nagpirma tayo, pumunta si Secretary Alan Peter Cayetano, dating Foreign Secretary sa Kuwait, at pumirma ng agreement on deployment of household workers. Pero yung mga ginagawa natin latest actions, how can we say it's a violation to operate? Tawag doon migrant, under the law, tawag doon Migrant Workers Resource Center, no? Paano natin sabihin violation yun? Requirement din ng batas yun. Of course, kung sabihin na natin ganito, kung violation man ng Kuwaiti laws yun, violation naman ng responsibility ng Philippine government kung walang gagawin yung ating pamahalaan. kunyari may humingi ng tulong dahil walang gagawin.